What's up, everybody? And today we're checking out Invading Greenland? Mistake of a lifetime. Here's why. This is by a channel called Military Rated. I've not seen this channel before. This is going to be a very interesting video. This video has been sent to me like 3 or 4 times in the past few days. Obviously, this is a new channel. I don't know what this video is going to be like. I react to loads and loads of different channels, so we'll see how this goes. With that being said, it came out in November 7th last year, this video. Obviously, in the past 48 hours, the reason it's been sent to me multiple times is because Trump is talking about taking Greenland, which is absolutely insane in my opinion. However, yes, I'm a former Royal Marines commando. I'm a former British military. I'm a British citizen and an American citizen, so you can probably tell I've got a lot of opinions on this. Instead of getting into the opinions, I want to actually talk about what it would take to invade Greenland, and that's where this video comes into play. It's a relatively longer video at 17.5 minutes, so sit back, relax, get yourself a chug. 10% off, link down below for the best drinking vessel in the world, handmade here in the UK by a small business, ships around the world, and fill it with some of my new drink, Morale, which I made this drink. Isn't that insane? It took 2 years of development, and we finally made it, and I put a lot of love and a lot of work into this, and the idea is to just get people outside. It's as simple as that. That's enough of the sponsors. So this channel, let me pull this up real quick. It's called Military Rated. It's a new channel that I've found. Like I've not seen this channel before. I've been sent it a couple of times, but this is the first time I've seen it. A channel dedicated to rating armies, kit, and power projection across the globe with a particular focus on the Nordics and Europe. We also upload geopolitics. For God's sake, Luke, sort your shit out. Geopolitical videos every now and then. We're 4 guys from Sweden, Norway, Finland, and Denmark, with 3 of us either being active military personnel or veterans. There you go. So go support the veterans over here. Go subscribe to them, all that good stuff. Let's check this video out. Let's see what they've got to say. They're obviously going to have the idea that they don't want Greenland to be invaded by America because they're from the Nordic countries, which I am also in agreement with. I think the idea that Trump taking Greenland is ridiculous and is actually quite toxic. And a lot of people will probably agree with me on that because I have a massive American audience. But do you know what? That's the way it is. I think this idea is stupid. America's desire. Listen, if they turned around, if Greenland turned around and did a vote and was like, do we want to be a part of America instead? And Greenland voted to be a part of America, then that's up to them. That's fair game. Just like in the UK, if Scotland voted for independence and they got it and they said, yeah, we want independence, I would be like, yeah, go and have independence. You don't want to be like Russia that wants to keep Ukraine, wants to take Ukraine like a toxic ex. Do you know what I mean? It's ridiculous. However, from what I've heard, the majority of people in Greenland do not want to be part of America. So, America's only option would be to invade it. I can't believe I'm saying that out loud. But let's watch this video and let's see what it's all about.
Ice, distance, and darkness. That's what defines Greenland as a military problem. If you ask whether the rest of NATO could realistically defend Greenland against a US invasion,
yes,
you're really asking who can move, fight, and sustain under Arctic conditions. Through blizzards, on ice-choked seas, with almost no infrastructure to lean on. And you're asking who would even want to. Outside of the MAGA core, I don't think the US public would back an invasion of Greenland.
No, I don't
or
think
Canada,
so.
For that matter. And I don't think Washington would choose to rupture NATO over it.
I'd like to think they wouldn't, but I wouldn't put it past her. I don't think they would. I think that, I personally think the talk, side subject, I think Trump's talk about taking Greenland is to distract from the Epstein files, but that's another thing. However, I have to say, a lot of NATO, European NATO countries actually actively participate in training up in places like Norway and do Arctic training. The Royal Marines especially. We go up to Norway all the time doing Arctic training. It's horrific, but it's done so that we can protect these countries that are in colder environments. Although I know the US do that, I don't think they do it anywhere near as much as a lot of European NATO countries. They do it, don't get me wrong, they do Arctic training, not as much as the Europeans do, especially the Nordic countries and especially the Royal Marines. That's a legit fact.
But for the sake of the community's most voted topic for our October community request, let's pressure test the scenario and see what winter capability, geography, and logistics actually say. I'm Tuomas, a former officer in the Finnish Defense Forces, and this is part 1 of October's community voted video.
You've got to love it. You've got to love it. Listen, I don't care if you're pro-Trump or not or whatever, and you want Canada and Greenland. I don't really care. We have to, as a community here on YouTube, support fellow veterans, all right? So please go over to this channel, get over there, give them a subscribe, okay?
The question was about Canada and Greenland. We'll focus on Greenland this week and do a Canada-specific video next week. Let us, as any good war planner would, start with the map. Greenland is officially huge. Its coastline is carved by fjords. A vast glacier sits in the middle all year round.
And it's a bit chilly.
The population could fit into a mid-sized European football stadium. There are only a handful of airfields that matter, a few usable deep water ports, and long, unforgiving distances between them.
Yeah.
The weather isn't just cold, it is equipment-breaking cold, and generally there's a mean wind which quickly packs snow into your gear at least 9 months of the year, from the end of September to the end of May. Operationally, this means that an army not trained or equipped for cold weather fighting would struggle after just a few months in theater. The biggest issue for a weapons-heavy military like the US is that rubber hardens, batteries die, lubricants thicken, optics fog, and wind turns a routine lift into a horror show.
Yeah, the idea of fighting in an Arctic place like that, I'd rather be in a desert any day. Yeah, I get it. Like, there was issues with lads having their weapons clog in Afghan and Iraq and stuff, and so they would basically run the weapons dry with no oil to some extent, to stop sand and stuff from attaching to the weapons. But it's so different in these Arctic countries. So different, the way that you have to maintain your equipment and the way you have to maintain yourself. People don't realize how much effort it is. And that's why a lot of European, again, British and Nordic countries train in this weather regularly. Not just, one expedition up there, okay, it's on my CV. I don't have to worry about it for the rest of my career, and if we fight up there, I'm good. They train yearly up there. Like, it's a common occurrence.
A bit like during the Finnish winter, you don't choose your tempo in Greenland. The weather chooses it for you. Any attacker depends on a tiny number of runways and protected anchorages. And any defender, including the Danish special operators who use Greenland as their playground, knows exactly which ones those are.
Yeah.
Most American military gear would cease to work if it was deployed to Greenland.
That's true.
Including the normal U.S. service rifle and much of its most advanced military technology, like the Abrams, Stryker, Bradley, and entire tubed artillery fleet. But we'll go over concrete examples of that a bit later in this episode. Now flip to the politics and likelihood of the US actually going for an allied territory and wrecking its alliances beyond repair. Greenland is part of the Kingdom of Denmark and inside NATO.
Again, I think it's all talk. I do think it's all talk. I'd be very surprised if they do it. I think it is a distraction, unfortunately. With that being said, it's part of NATO. There's other ways that the US can do a deal, maybe make some more bases there. There's ways that this can work for everyone. Invading, it's just not going to happen. They're just stirring up shit. That's all they're doing.
A US assault would mean attacking a treaty ally.
Yeah.
An Article 5 nightmare, a diplomatic shockwave, and a strategic own goal that shatters American alliances worldwide. As we covered in our episode recently on the actual strength of the US allies, it is quite clearly the second military power on the globe. That is why I call this scenario unlikely. But unlikely doesn't mean uninteresting, because it exposes the physics that decide Arctic campaigns and winter warfare, a topic I've trained soldiers in for decades now. Logistics, weather discipline, and winter skills.
I also want to preface this by saying there's a lot of European countries now that are really ramping up their military spending. We literally, yesterday, as of so I'm recording this the day it's coming out on the Wednesday, the 7th. Yesterday, we had both France and Britain make a deal with Ukraine that when the war is over, we're actually going to put troops in Ukraine. And Germany said they're going to protect Ukraine. We've also had countries back Denmark and Greenland saying, no, they're not going to invade. We're not going to have this. And so Europe has decided to be like, you know what? We can't necessarily rely on America anymore, considering how volatile they can be. And so we have to protect themselves, which in truth, let's be honest, that should have been done a while ago. European countries shouldn't rely on, other countries like America to do the majority of their work, right? So I think it's a good thing. But still, they are ramping up recently quite substantially. And although this was done in November, we've got the manpower, etc., etc. Expect this to change quite drastically over the next 1 to maybe 5 years. I would say 5-year plan would be to drastically increase a lot of these numbers here.
Those factors don't care how big your defense budget is. Try asking Stalin how that worked in my own Finland in 1939. Winter capability is where Europe, especially the Nordics, Baltics and British, quietly shines. Norway, Sweden, Finland, and to a lesser extent Denmark, train to fight in snow, darkness, and deep cold several months every year.
These vehicles here in the back, I think they're called the Vikings or something like that. They are insanely cool little bits of kit. I had to maintain a couple when I was in the Royal Marines. They called the Vikings. Let me Google it real quick. Military vehicle. Is it the Viking? It is, yeah. The Viking. It's such a cool little bit of kit. We have quite a few of them in the Royal Marines. And they can be used all over the place. Royal Marine Viking vehicle. Although that looks like a different variant of it, actually. That might be a bit different, that one. It looks a bit squarer on the front. This is the BVS-10, which is the Royal Marine Viking one, right? I don't know if you can see it on my screen. But that one looks a bit squarer on the front, actually. So I might be wrong. That might be a different one there, actually. But my presumption is it's a very, very similar style of vehicle.
They practice ski-borne infantry movement, over snow mobility with BV series carriers and snowmobiles, Arctic casualty care, camouflage in whiteout conditions, and the kind of small unit fieldcraft that keeps people alive at -30. The UK, Netherlands, Germany, France, and others also send units north for winter warfare rotations every year, building a shared playbook. Short, sharp movements between hardened bivouacs, fuel and battery management, cold weather marksmanship, and keeping drones and optics working when most electronics want to die.
This has also been done since World War II. I can speak from the British Royal Marines Commandos. This has been done since World War II. The idea is they want to train in these Arctic places to protect the eastern flank in case Russia ever decided to attack. That's what it's always been. It just so happens that it might be the western flank.
This culture of winter soldiering matters more than shiny kit. It shows up in the boring routines, how you dry socks, how you pack a bulk sled, how you rotate sentries so no one freezes. And in particular, how to tire out and isolate your enemy by using the elements. First, let's look at what kind of Arctic capability the opposing sides would have in such a scenario. In a scenario where the rest of NATO had to defend Greenland, or even consider operations in extreme Arctic conditions, the balance of true winter capability between Europe, Canada, and the United States would matter more than almost anything else. And here, Europe and Canada have a clear edge. Across the Nordic region, winter warfare isn't an afterthought. It's the foundation of military training. Between national Arctic brigades, reserve formations, and large-scale NATO exercises like Cold Response and Nordic Response, Europe can field 80 to 120,000 active duty troops with recent full-spectrum Arctic and subarctic training. Finland alone contributes a huge portion of that total, around 24,000 active troops and a wartime reserve exceeding 250,000, almost all trained to operate, move, and fight in snow and temperatures down to -30 or 40. Sweden and Norway add several tens of thousands more through elite Arctic units. Sweden's K4 battalion in Norland and Norway's Arctic Brigade, as well as annual cold weather rotations that push much of their professional armies through sub-zero field conditions. The United Kingdom, Netherlands, Germany, Poland, Italy, and France all...
I also have to preface this. This is doing NATO without America versus America. I think in the very unlikely situation that Trump's America did invade Greenland and it turned out to a full war of NATO versus America, I don't think every single NATO country would take part in it. I think there would be a handful. With that being said, I don't think that you'll see, I don't think Italy would get involved. There's a few countries there. We could go through it, but I think there's a few countries there that I think would stay out of it personally.
Run specialized winter and alpine elements that cycle through the same demanding Nordic courses each year. And that's before we mention how Norway's special operators host allied special teams for Arctic war games every year, where stories of them handing tough lessons to visiting elite US units are, let's just say, not uncommon. Canada adds another strong component. The Canadian Rangers, a lightly equipped but locally rooted force of over 5,600 personnel, act as the permanent eyes and ears of the Canadian military in the far north. They're backed by 4 Arctic Response Company groups, each around 150 troops, which train specifically for operations in frozen environments. When you factor in regular rotations like Operation Nunalivut and Arctic Bison, Canada can deploy somewhere between 6,000 and 8,000 Arctic-trained personnel on relatively short notice.
I think the big question here would be Canada, considering they are between the United States and Greenland. How would Canada react more than anything? I think that would be the massive question. Because obviously, when it comes to the location of everything, everyone else that would take part in it are to the east of Greenland, right? Britain, the Nordic countries, etc. But Canada is between America and Greenland. That is vastly different. Vastly different.
And scale that further through rotations of regular infantry trained in winter warfare. By contrast, the United States has made some strides in rebuilding its Arctic readiness in recent years, but it's still catching up. Its main Arctic formation is the 11th Airborne Division based in Alaska, numbering roughly 10,000 to 12,000 soldiers, supported by the Northern Warfare Training Center near Fairbanks. When you add the Marine Corps Mountain Warfare Training Center in Bridgeport, California, and special operations courses in cold environments like Kodiak, Alaska, the total rises to about 15,000 to 25,000 U.S. troops with active Arctic or deep winter qualifications. That's still significantly fewer than Europe and Canada combined, though the U.S. has the logistics muscle and airlift to move faster once it's on the ground. Where European and Canadian forces really pull ahead is in kit that actually works in Greenland-grade cold. Across NATO minus the US, there are about 2,000 articulated over-snow carriers, mainly Swedish-made varying BV models that float over deep snow and keep running at minus 40, in service or serviceable storage. The US, by contrast, fields under 300, including its new BVS-10 buy, which hasn't yet arrived. It's the same story with light mobility. Europe and Canada together run roughly 10,000 to 14,000 military heavy snow scooters across the Nordics, France, Italy, Germany, Canada, and the Baltics, while US forces operate a few hundred for Alaska, mountain warfare, and special operations rotations.
The other thing you would have to factor in as well is how quickly America would turn around and build equipment specifically for this environment. And I think a good example of that would be to look back at how quickly the US adapted their equipment for Desert Storm in Afghanistan, etc., and Iraq. Like, how quickly did they start adapting to that environment? And would they have enough time to adapt their military spending to facilitate Arctic equipment? That's a whole conversation in itself, because again, you're talking about the US and how different warfare is as well now. It's not as much. I mean, it is in Ukraine and stuff like that, but it's not as much boots on the ground now either. And so it does make things change so much.
In terrain where trucks or even light armored vehicles bog down, those numbers translate directly into an issue that is hard to overlook for any war planner. The same logic applies to armor and artillery, only fleets that actually run in deep cold count. Think CV-90, Norway and Finland's Leopard 2, Patria carriers, Sweden's Stridsvagn, Canada's LAV 6. All of them run with real winter modifications, external engine heaters, low-temperature lubricants, wider shoes and tracks, and Arctic maintenance kits. Norway and Sweden even field CV-90 variants tuned specifically for snow. Add those winter variants up and you get the picture. Across NATO without the United States, there are 300 to 500 cold-weather modified modern tanks, about 600 to 1,000 winterized infantry fighting vehicles, and well over 1,000 Patria variants made in Poland and Finland that can operate in extreme cold. By contrast, the US Army has no armored brigades permanently based in the Arctic. Abrams, Strykers and Bradleys can be winter-kitted with a lot of work, but the number of fully cold-weather packaged armor sets ready for sustained Arctic ops is tiny compared to Europe's capability in this area.
Yeah, God, the whole idea. Could you imagine if America actually tried to take Greenland? Like, in my opinion, it wouldn't be a straight fight of NATO versus America, because again, not all countries would be part of it. Also, Russia would take full advantage of NATO's breakdown and Europe's attention being put elsewhere. They would take so much advantage of it. It would be a disaster, wouldn't it? It would be such a disaster.
We're talking a few hundred in total, and the knowledge base within the US military to perform this sort of retrofitting is likely just as small.
Yeah.
After 70 years of mainly fighting in warmer climates.
Also, just a side note here, this video is fantastic. I'm loving this slower breakdown and understanding of what's going on. Like I said, there is a link down below to this video. Go over to their channel, give it some love, support these veterans and active service members.
At least for now, if winter warfare broke out in the North Atlantic or Arctic, say in Greenland or the Norwegian Sea, the majority of troops who could move, fight and survive there on short notice would still come from Europe and Canada. They've lived, trained and fought in the cold for decades, and the equipment they use, from snowmobiles to over-snow carriers, is battle-tested and outsizes the US capability in the same department at least tenfold.
Yeah.
So while the US would bring unmatched naval firepower and fair-weather air dominance to any defenders of Greenland, it's the Europeans and Canadians who would likely do most of the actual fighting on the ground in Arctic conditions.
That's true.
And that makes sense. This is their environment. They've trained for it, built vehicles for it, and can survive in it without needing massive energy inputs or specialized infrastructure. In simple terms, the US can likely cover the whole island in bombs, but the Northern Europeans and Canadians can stay there. Add to this the immense issues the US is currently facing in its sea lift capabilities in comparison to Europe's quite massive civilian freight and sea lift fleet, and you'd be hard-placed to see the US winning a protracted logistical war. So how would a fight look if someone forced this scenario? An American operation would likely depend on securing a small number of locations quickly, airfields and nearby harbors, then rushing in engineers, fuel, de-icing, shelters, and air defenses to keep the bridgeheads alive.
You have to also remember, we know that America is the dominant force on the planet, right? We know that. But it is also very, very easy for them to be arrogant about it, and because of that, misplace their actual abilities to fight someone as well trained as European troops, right? Like, it's so easy to go in thinking that you're the big dog and underestimate how well trained these troops are. I mean, go online and see any American Special Forces or Marines talk about training with European soldiers, and they always say they're insane. They're really, really good. We see this all the time. You get it the other way around, right? Obviously, you get it though. You see videos of me, Royal Marines or Special Forces talking about how good it is to work with American soldiers. But I think the average American underestimates how good European soldiers are at fighting. And that's the truth. Whether you believe me or not, that's the truth, really.
That initial lift is vulnerable to timing. A 2-day storm window can close the sky, scatter ships, and leave air assault elements thin and isolated. It could likely use Pitufik Air Base as a forward operating base, but it is important to note that getting to and from this airbase over land is only possible with normal transport about 3 months of the year, and going from it to the more populated areas down south over land is a nigh on impossible task without the proper gear. A European-Canadian defense would exploit that. You don't try to meet the US in a fair-weather set piece where its air force and carrier groups would decimate a defense. You make every landing zone a maintenance problem and every approach costly. You create white noise with decoys, radar reflectors, and heat sources in the wrong areas. You lay mines and sensor grids on the few viable taxiways. You combine long-range fires with small Arctic patrols, like that of the Danish Special Ops Team permanently on the island aptly named the Sirius Patrol, that can move.
The Danish Special Ops in Greenland. I need to know more about this Sirius Patrol. I don't know much about these, but I definitely want to know more about them.
On skis, behind dog sleds and snowmobiles, living off caches and hitting fuel depots and power units rather than chasing US units in the open.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if this happened and there was a full-scale invasion of Greenland and it was versus NATO. You would see a lot more sneaky beaky stuff going on. You would see a lot more infiltration in small units, special forces, causing disruption. Because at the end of the day, if you cut off the logistics, that would cut off the head of the snake at the end of the day, wouldn't it?
Denmark's recent cooperation with Ukraine likely means that it has access to non-electrical powered drones capable of knocking out the 4 diesel generators, keeping Pitufik warm. Without the necessary heating, the issues US troops had with the weather in Vietnam would seem like a dream when the temperatures drop below freezing in August. Maritime operations are no easier. Ice and distance punish large surface groups. Submarines and long-range patrol aircraft still matter, but the fight narrows to a few usable approaches and anchorages. A defender does not need to sink everything. It only needs to make replenishment uncertain, slow, and costly. That forces an attacker to bring ice-capable escorts, more tankers, more de-icing agents, more of everything. As we say in the Finnish army, winter logistics scale badly. A drum of fuel in winter is heavier in effort than it is in kilograms. It needs heated storage, careful handling, and a clean supply chain of winter-capable pumps, hoses, and couplings that will not crack in minus 40 degrees Celsius. Many recruits in the Nordic armies learn this the hard way. One slip in preparation can ruin an operation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's basic stuff. Obviously, it's escalated in Arctic warfare because if you're not prepared, you're certainly going to get absolutely hammered by the weather. But it's also the same in jungle warfare. It's also the same in desert warfare. It just so happens that it's on the more extreme level in Arctic warfare because you will suffer very, very quickly.
In Europe plus Canada, the ice-capable inventory is again much larger than the American inventory. Norway fields 4 Arctic-capable patrol vessels, 1 Svalbard-class ice-breaking, and 3 Jan Mayen-class ice-strengthened patrol ships. Finland now brings 7 ice-capable ships, including NATO's foremost icebreaker production knowledge. Sweden brings 5, Canada brings 9, and is expanding further. The United Kingdom contribution is niche, but useful with HMS Protector. The Baltic states add capacity at the margins. Latvia has 1. Estonia has 1. The Netherlands adds 1 as well. Most of Greenland's ports freeze over in around November, and to be able to get anywhere close to land, you're very dependent on this ability. The US, for its part, only has 2 capable icebreakers, though they have recently signed a deal with Finland to create more, which would obviously be scrapped in such a scenario. So could the rest of NATO actually stop the US in Greenland? The blunt answer is that stopping isn't the right lens. The US is a superpower with unrivaled global lift and strike capabilities. If Washington chose to batter its way into Greenland, it could seize air and sea bridgeheads and pour in force. The realistic question is whether the rest of NATO could make that choice politically impossible and operationally miserable.
It's not only that, it's whether NATO would turn around and do something about it quick enough. Because we would only hear about the US wanting Greenland when they start getting boots on the ground. Like, that's when it gets serious. And then, does NATO hesitate? Do the UK government, does our Prime Minister, does the leaders of European countries hesitate because it's America? And that hesitation therefore causes a delay. And before you know it, the US has taken it. And then you can't, then it's like, then what? Then do you go and fight against them? Because I don't think NATO would. And so it's a case of the UK and these Nordic countries and the rest of NATO, they need a plan. They need a plan right now. And it needs to be like, if the US decided to fight and take Greenland, what do we do? And do we not hesitate? Because I think if I open my phone up right now and it said the US is taking Greenland, I think the UK, I think a lot of countries would hesitate to do anything. And in that hesitation, we've already lost. You know what I mean? Again, I don't think it's going to happen. I just don't think it's going to happen. I think it's a distraction anyway.
So costly, slow, and publicly self-defeating that the idea collapses under its own weight as opposition to US casualties generally makes them pull out of wars. The answer there is yes. In the Arctic, a capable defender with winter skills doesn't need parity in tonnage, missiles, or fancy aircraft carriers. It needs to deny tempo, complicate sustainment, and wait for the attacker's maintenance and morale curves to dip below the red line after the brief 3 months of degrees above freezing are over.
Yeah.
There's also the alliance dimension. NATO's strength isn't any single army, it's the habit of acting together. An American assault on Danish territory would snap that habit. European publics would rally to Denmark. Canada would be in an impossible position politically and strategically.
Yeah.
And that tension alone shows why the scenario is so unlikely. Deterrence here is partly moral and legal, but it's also practical. Every US planner understands that fighting the weather and your own alliance at the same time is a losing proposition. As promised, next week we'll move to the people who currently lives above the noisy neighbors and ask the same hard question about Canada, where the distances aren't quite as large and the weather generally at least slightly favors the US arsenal. We'll look at Canada's strengths and weaknesses and look at how costly the same exercise would be if the US tried a similar move there. As always, have a great weekend, and if you haven't already, we'd be honored if you hit that subscribe and like button.
That was an absolutely fantastic video. Legitimately, really, really good. Make sure you head over, link down below to the original video. Go and check that out. Defending Greenland by Military Rated. Legitimately really good video there with some really good information. I'd love to know your thoughts. Look, I'm an American citizen. I'm also a British citizen, right? I have lots of different thoughts about this. And ultimately, do I think Greenland is an incredibly strategic military location? Of course it is. But at the same time, Greenland is part of NATO. Like, we don't, America doesn't need it. Like, they're already friends. Like, the idea that America is like, we want it, I think it's all just a distraction. It's all just talk. That's what I think it is. I think that they're using this because tensions are rising because of Venezuela and all that lot. And then you've got the Epstein files that everyone keeps forgetting about. And so them talking about Greenland is doing exactly what they want it to do, is take eyes away from other things. That's what I think it is. With that being said, I do think that European countries should stop relying on America for support, and they really do need to start solidifying and working harder on getting a good military. Because when we've got a strong Europe, they are peak. They are the top of the top. They are the best of the best. We can all agree on that. It's just a case of getting them to that point again. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. I'd love to know your thoughts because this is obviously a massive debate. I know there's a lot of people that watch my videos that are pro-Trump. There's a lot of people that are against Trump. And I don't think videos like these should be sparking, although there will be that odd one or two people. In fact, go in the comments right now. You'll see someone be like, we're the United States. We can do what we want. Listen, I don't give a shit about them comments. What I care about is people talking strategically, having legitimate discussions, mature discussions about mature subjects. Is this something that needs to be talked about? Is it distraction? What are we talking about here when it comes to Europe, NATO Europe, we could say, and their military strength? What do we say about how chaotic America is right now? What happens with Russia, Ukraine? What happens with China? What happens if this all kicks off and then China decides to invade Taiwan? Does that distract America? Lots of questions. I'd love to have the discussion down below. Link down below. Check out Chug. 10% off. Link down below. Go buy yourself some morale if you haven't already. Other than that, I love you all. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye.